I'm Nick Rodriguez with the Squid Ink service team, and today we're going to talk about navigating your CoPilot or CoPilot Turbo controller screens. For today's video, we're going to be using a CoPilot Max Turbo controller. What you're looking at right now on your screen is the home screen after the controller has been booted up. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we're looking at. On the left-hand side, what you're going to see are the different options for different menus that we have. We have start and stop for our print, our messages screen, our settings screen, and then a sleep mode for the controller. You'll also notice that at the top of the screen, there's a print preview of the message that is currently pulled up. Below that, you'll see the name of the message and the production count, which counts how many times the system has been triggered. You'll also see an ink status below there, which tells you how much ink is left in your control or in your print head. We also have our date and time at the very bottom here, whether or not we're set up for Ethernet or wireless, and the status of our print system, whether or not we're printing or not. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these features here. If I were to stop the print here, you'll notice that my printing status turns to not printing. This is good for maintenance on the line if need be. What this does is it cuts out the photo eye or incoming trigger signals. Let's go ahead and go down to the message screen. Here, we can go ahead and navigate using the scroll on the right-hand side. We also have the option to delete any messages that we may not want on the controller. For example, now if I were to select a message, say head 1 message, we have to make sure you hit apply. The green check indicates that everything went smoothly. And there's our basic test message. Now each controller that gets sent out should have a default message attached to it. We're going to go ahead and pull that up. The default message is a good way to test your print head if you haven't had any messages created yet, or if you wanted to test the print. Let's go ahead and take a look at our settings pages here, which is located on the left-hand side, identified by the cog. What you're seeing here is page 1 of the settings pages. This is going to be the most useful page for when you're setting up your print system at installation. The very top row here that we see are going to be your most important pages, and we're going to go ahead and go through all of them one by one. Very top left-hand side here, you'll see looks like a speedometer. This will be where you indicate whether or not you are using an encoder or using a line speed. If I want to shut my encoder off, hit apply. What you'll see now is that I can go ahead and set up a set speed for how my system is going to run. What you're looking at the bottom here is 1 being the slowest, and this number will indicate the fastest speed of the specific printer that you're using. The number on the top is the current setup. I can use my arrows to navigate to a slower or faster speed. Again, once I change this, I'll have to hit apply. Green check indicates that we're good. Most applications, specifically what we're doing today, is going to use an encoder, so I won't need the set speed. I can go ahead and turn my encoder on and hit apply. Next page. Distance to trigger. This is the setting where you would go ahead and measure the distance from your trigger source, whether it's a photo eye, a switch, relay, and input that distance located here. Right now our distance is set to 2.38, but we could have a range of 0.14 or 25 inches. Each printing type or printer head type is going to have its own recommended distance that you will find in the manual. You can also change the measurement indicators here, whether by inches or centimeters. This next icon is going to go ahead and allow you to set up the direction, left to right or right to left. Pretty self-explanatory, but once you change this, you're going to want to hit apply, just like everything else. This icon with the wheel allows you to change the DPI and encoder divider of your system. For the CoPilot Max Turbo that we're using today, a DPI of 300 and a divider setting of 3 is standard. Typically, this is left alone unless you need to elongate or shrink down the size of your message when using an encoder. Repeat trigger. For applications that use a repeat message, we can go ahead and designate how we want that repeat to be triggered, whether by an external source, like a photo eye that's blocked or a trigger switch, or by the clock in the controller itself. Below, we have our settings for Squid Connect to go ahead and send out outputs and receive limited inputs from PLCs and other applications. Right now, we don't have the Squid Connect connected, so what you'll see is it's grayed out. Again, once I make any changes to either of these, I have to hit apply. Our counters. If the message you selected had counters, you would see them listed below here, the number of counters and the actual value of the counters. This is the screen where you can go ahead and change your start of the counter if you wanted to start at some place that wasn't set in Orion. Say you were halfway through the count and you want to start back at that number. You can go ahead and change that here. So to show you more about the counters, we went ahead and selected a message that actually had a counter in it. You can see it right there. We're going to go ahead and take a look at what that menu looks like now that we have a counter in our message. Since we only have one counter, we can see that there's counter 1 labeled there. And in counter 1, we see our range. Looks like it's been set up from 1 to 99. Now, if I didn't want it to start at 1, I can go ahead and increase where that number is, or decrease that number. Say I wanted to start at 20. I can hit apply. The next icon over you'll see here is this icon. This is the spit settings menu. Now, spit settings are something we use for our solvent inks. For something like the Max printhead, which uses the 3200 solvent ink, not much is going to be needed to be set up here. But for some of our other systems that use a more aggressive, faster drying solvents, they may have a spit mode suggestion that we can go ahead and set up here. Now, if I scroll down, you'll see the different configurations that we can use for the spit. Now, what spit does, and its whole purpose, is to help keep the nozzles on the print engine open and not dried out. Some of the spit modes that we'll see are Ghost, Ghost All, and Column. Column will spit a full row of jets if it's selected, depending on the number of columns we have here. Ghost will use a gray field in between, randomly selecting dots in between prints. And Ghost All will have that same random dot placement, but throughout the print. Now, the Ghost and Ghost All spit is supposed to be very minimal to the point where it's going to be very hard to see, and it's mostly for our very fast, very aggressive solvent inks. We don't need a spit here since we're using an oil-based ink. So that's another thing. If you're using oil-based inks or UV inks, spit mode isn't needed. Now, if we had a squid check installed where we can validate our barcodes, this would be where we would set that up. All of our settings are located down here, and the feature to turn it on and whatnot is up there. We can cover the settings of the squid check in a separate video. The next icon you see in the row below us is going to be this USB icon. Currently it is grayed out because we don't have anything plugged into the USB port itself. I'm going to go ahead and plug in a USB stick that has a few messages on it. Once you plug in a USB stick, you should always get this USB load screen. Now, depending on how the USB stick was configured, whether or not it had loaded messages or anything like that on it, will determine what menus are available here. Right now, you'll see that we can apply updates if we had a specific update on my USB stick, but I do not at the moment. So the update option is grayed out. Down here, we can go ahead and pull the configurations of the controller. So this includes the way the printer is printing, the direction, the speed, everything like that. This is a helpful tool in case we need to troubleshoot, or if we want to back up this information as a way to set up future controllers in future installations. This icon here, the USB symbol pointing towards the controller, allows you to transfer messages from the USB stick itself into the controller. You will only see this if you have acceptable messages on your USB. So if we were going to go ahead and try that, let's see what it looks like. Select USB. Once the message transfer is complete, you'll kind of get an update as to what happened there. If you deleted any messages, which depends on how the USB was configured in Orion, how many messages you have added, and how many messages are totally located on the controller itself. Once you've read that, you can go ahead and hit that check mark, and you'll enter back into the USB page. Now, say I was adding another controller on my line or a separate line that was using the same messages, same type of controller. I can go ahead and select this icon to pull the messages that are housed on this controller onto the USB, and then allow myself to transfer those messages to that new controller. So this USB load menu has a few useful options here. Now, once I'm done here, I can either select back, or if I want to pull out my USB, I can go ahead and hit eject. At that point, it's safe to pull the USB out. We'll go ahead and take a look at our reset menu. Now, reset allows you to reset three different things. Your ink levels for either head 1, or if there was a second head, it would be down here, head 2. That is important once you are changing over your ink cartridges for both the Max and the Max 512 print heads, as well as the Active 128 CoPilot. I can also reset my count for the production counter, which we saw here. Hitting that reset will drop that number down to 0. If I'm having issues with my network, or if I have just plugged in a new PC and I need to reestablish my network connection, I can go ahead and select this. What this will do is reset that and allow the controller and the PC or whatever we plugged in to communicate with each other, and works really well when both items are set up for DHCP. Now here is one of the icons that you'll only see in the Max or in the Max Turbo controllers. We'll go ahead and take a look at what it is. At the top you'll see ink cartridge swap. Before you change your ink cartridges while using the Max and even the Max 512 printhead, you'll want to press the Max cartridge swap. This will allow you about 90 seconds to replace that old cartridge with a new cartridge. After you replace that new cartridge, you can go ahead and continue with the commissioning process, which we have a video of as well. Now, this feature at the bottom here is only for the Max printhead. We can change our DPI from 300 or 150. 150 will allow you to run at faster print speeds if need be, and those speeds can be found in the CoPilot Max User's Guide. You'll see the speeds for 300 and 150 listed in that. The icon next to the Max icon here is a thermometer, and this is where we can actually see the internal temperature for our Max printhead. Now this is a feature that you'll only see in the Max printheads and the CoPilot 500 printheads, as both have a heat source within them, allowing them to print at slightly colder temperatures. What you'll see here is the actual read of the internal print engine of the printhead. If this temperature reaches to above 130, you will get a warning. Now that concludes our first page here. What we're going to do is actually take a look at this information screen. Now today, for the information screen, you'll see that it gives you the information for the controller itself. This important information is used to determine where it sits on firmware and software revision. You'll see a number there. Also, it should present the printhead versions, serial number of the controller, IP address, and whatever printer name you've assigned to the controller through Orion. Now, this could be important if you need to troubleshoot certain issues with your system, or if you are looking to just connect to it via IP. It'd be a quick way to find that. We may ask for some of this information if you ever call in to service for support. Now, to go to our second page of our settings page, you'll see this icon located here. This will bring you into the secondary page, where we can go ahead and set up whether or not we are wireless or Ethernet, or we can set up our calibration and a few other things. Let's go ahead and go down the line. Our first indication here is wireless. If you're looking to set up your controller with a wireless setup, what you're going to need is an approved wireless adapter that will be plugged into the USB port of your controller. This will allow the controller to go ahead and locate any routers that are in the area, and you would go ahead and find that name here by pressing this. This icon will go out and search for any wireless routers set up. Right now we currently don't have any, so you'll see this bar that comes in. If I had one that I was going to be connecting to, I can go ahead and put in my password if there was one and hit apply. But right now, we're not set up for wireless. The next icon over is our Ethernet. Now, all of our CoPilot and CoPilot Turbo controllers will be shipped out with DHCP selected, which should make connecting to your controller pretty simple. Now, if your application requires that you have static IPs and control over the IPs, that is also an option. Once you have static IP selected, you can go ahead and change your specific IP address in the top. Your subnet mask will be located here, and if you press these bars, you can assign a default gateway. Now again, for most applications, DHCP will be acceptable. If you find that your controller screen calibration is a little off, you can go ahead and select this icon. What you're going to want on hand is a stylus or something that won't damage the screen but has a point to it before you go ahead and start this process. Now we can go ahead and test and make sure everything works. Perfect. If, for whatever reason, that calibration routine does not work, go ahead and call the service department at Squid Ink, and we can go ahead and send you a calibration file via email. Our next icon here is this one, the remote mode. Now, for applications that are using the database server feature, this is where you would go ahead and set up the remote mode to connect the controller directly to that database location so that you can pull messages from the controller itself. If not, you can go ahead and force those messages from Orion at the location where the database server is running. For most applications, this will not be needed. The rest of the icons here at the lower end here will give us options to adjust our date and time and to select the format in which that is displayed. Again, any changes made to these, I have to make sure I hit apply. I can go ahead and set my current local time as well. The icon you're seeing there that's grayed out will be for situations when the message that we have pulled up has user data. User data is when the line operator can go ahead and change certain parts of the message right here on the controller. Right now we don't have a message with user data selected, so the keyboard screen is grayed out. This next icon is our peak encoder speed icon. This is mainly a troubleshooting screen. We can see how fast in feet per minute that encoder has been spinning since the time that this controller was last powered on. This may help us troubleshoot if you run into any issues in the field. And lastly, we have our languages. Right now you'll see that we have a variety of languages available. The current language being English, indicated by the blue square around the flag. But you can see we have German, Korean, I believe that's simplified Chinese, Spanish, Japanese, and Russian. Back at our home page here, since we've already covered our message screen and our settings screen, is our last screen here, sleep mode, which allows the display itself to go black. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Go to our moon icon, and to activate it, we will select that. And what that does is power down that screen itself. The controller is still active and can still communicate and whatnot, but the screen is off. To bring it back, simply tap the screen. One last thing that I did not mention during our home screen is this icon here, this magnifying glass. This magnifying glass, once selected, allows you to go ahead and take a closer look at the message that you have currently selected. I have different levels of zoom that are pre-programmed, so I can select 75%, 100, or I can select the full substrate view. This will be helpful if you find that certain parts of your message are cut off for whatever reason. Most likely that'll be due to the way the message was created in Orion. But this will allow you to confirm what you have loaded on the screen. Again, I'm Nick Rodriguez with the Squid Ink Service Team. I hope you found this video helpful. If you'd like to find some more, go ahead and find us on YouTube or elsewhere on the web. See ya.